The signature in the beginning. An evidence-weighted inquiry into origin, information, and the Genesis 1:1 structure. Central question. Does the cumulative evidence from biological information, causality, cosmology, and the mathematical structure of Genesis 1:1 more strongly support unguided naturalism or intelligent design? A signature at the beginning. Genesis 1:1 stands at the threshold of Scripture. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim et haaretz. In English, it is commonly rendered, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth." The verse contains 7 Hebrew words and 28 Hebrew letters when counted without vowel points. Under the ordinary standard Hebrew alphanumeric values, those 7 words total 2,701. That number is not merely a total. It factors as 37 times 73. It is also the 73rd triangular number. The structure goes deeper. The first 5 Hebrew words total 1,998, which is 37 times 54. The final 2 Hebrew words, usually rendered "and the earth," total 703, which is 37 times 19. Together, 1,998 plus 703 equals 2,701, the full verse total. The verse also has an internal 37 divisible word subset architecture. Across the 127 possible non-empty word groupings, 23 groupings are divisible by 37. These are not 23 independent miracles. They form a structured pattern, 11 complementary pairs plus the full verse. The point is not that every arithmetic feature proves divine authorship by itself. The point is that the opening verse of the Bible contains a compact, layered, textually central numerical structure that deserves serious consideration. The same structure also connects to a second layer. The Hebrew word Torah has standard value 611 and reduced value 17. Genesis 1:1 has standard value 2,701 and reduced value 82. In the decimal expansion of pi, the first 611 digits sum to 2,701, and the first 17 digits sum to 82. That does not settle the case by itself. Pi is infinite, decimal digits can be searched, and the statistical force depends on fixed rule testing. But the correspondence is arithmetically real, text-keyed, and connected to the opening verse of the Torah itself. This inquiry asks whether such a structure is best dismissed as ordinary coincidence, or whether it belongs inside a broader cumulative case involving life, information, causality, mathematical law, and design. The argument is not offered as deductive proof. It is a cumulative, evidence-weighted comparison. Some claims are directly checkable arithmetic. Some are empirical observations or active scientific hypotheses. Some are philosophical inferences about the best explanation of the facts. The case is strongest when those categories are kept distinct. The comparison is limited. Unguided naturalism, as used here, means the view that matter, energy, laws, life, information, consciousness, and rationality ultimately arise without a transcendent, intelligent creator. Intelligent design, as used here, means the inference that certain features of reality are better explained by intelligence than by blind matter, chance, and necessity alone. A creator in this argument means an intelligent source outside the physical system of time, space, matter, and energy. A creator is not another object inside the universe. The creator hypothesis is proposed as an ultimate explanation for why there is an ordered universe at all, why it contains laws, why it permits life, why information-bearing systems exist, and why the first verse of Scripture appears to contain a coherent mathematical structure. The question is therefore not whether every detail has been settled beyond all possible objection. The question is which explanation has greater force when the evidence is considered together. The DNA and origin of life problem. All known cellular life depends on a hereditary information system. In modern organisms, that system is DNA. DNA is not merely a collection of atoms, it is a sequence-bearing polymer whose arrangement matters. The same chemical letters in different orders produce different biological instructions. This makes the origin of life problem more than a problem of chemistry. It is a problem of chemically embodied information. DNA functions inside a system. It is copied, transcribed, repaired, regulated, packaged, and interpreted. Proteins perform much of the work inside the cell, but the information used to build proteins is itself stored in nucleic acid sequences. This creates a central origin question. How did the first system capable of storing and transmitting functional biological information arise before the modern DNA protein machinery existed? A cell is not merely a bag of chemicals. It is a regulated, energy-processing, information-directed system. If one component is present without the rest, the system does not become life. DNA without machinery is inert as a biological system. Proteins without coded instructions do not establish heredity. A membrane without internal information does not produce descent. Metabolism without heredity does not generate cumulative evolution. The origin problem concerns the integrated arrival of a system in which these functions cooperate. Origin of life models often attempt to avoid the full DNA-protein interdependence by proposing an earlier RNA-centered stage. RNA is relevant because it can store sequence information and, in some forms, catalyze reactions. The RNA world hypothesis is therefore a serious scientific proposal. It is not a demonstrated historical fact. The RNA world model is supported by several real observations. RNA can store information. Ribozymes can catalyze reactions. Laboratory work has produced RNA enzyme systems under controlled conditions. Model protocell studies show that fatty acid vesicles can interact with RNA chemistry in experimentally significant ways. These results are meaningful and should not be ignored. They show that origin of life research is not empty speculation. But the question is not whether individual pieces can be studied. The question is whether there is now a demonstrated consensus end-to-end pathway from plausible prebiotic chemistry to a durable hereditary system with preservation, variation, compartmental continuity, energy use, and open-ended evolvability. Current research has not yet supplied that complete bridge. Many naturalistic origin of life models propose an RNA-centered stage before DNA genomes and coded proteins because RNA has both informational and catalytic capacities. That proposal is an attempted solution to the DNA protein chicken and egg problem. It grants that the modern cell is too integrated to be explained by simply starting with DNA, proteins, and translation machinery already in place. The RNA world hypothesis tries to imagine an earlier system where one molecule carried more than one role. That may be a useful model. It may explain some real prebiotic possibilities, but it does not remove the central pressure point unless it can show how the coordinated requirements of life arose together with enough stability to become a continuing lineage. The coordinated requirements include information storage, copying, energy capture, compartmentalization, error tolerance, molecular availability, and continuity of function. A theory that explains only one component does not yet explain the origin of life. A theory that produces building blocks does not yet produce a reproducing information system. A theory that produces compartments does not yet produce heredity. A theory that produces self-organization does not yet produce coded biological information. Recent origin of life research has made genuine progress. Laboratory work has addressed activated ribonucleotides, improved RNA polymerase ribozymes, RNA replication under pH freeze-thaw cycling, RNA aminoacylation, peptidyl RNA synthesis in water, and small polymerase ribozymes capable of limited self and complement synthesis under defined conditions. These are important advances. They should be treated as serious science. Even so, they remain partial steps inside controlled systems. They do not yet amount to a sufficiently demonstrated pathway from non-living chemistry to a self-sustaining, heritable, evolving cell. The issue is not whether every historical step must be reproduced in a laboratory with perfect completeness before naturalistic models can be taken seriously. The issue is whether the proposed mechanisms have demonstrated enough continuity, integration, and plausibility to make design inference unnecessary or premature. This is not an argument from ignorance. The claim is not, science has not solved this, therefore design. The claim is narrower. Origin of life research has not yet shown how unguided chemistry crossed the threshold into a durable, information-bearing hereditary system. That unresolved bridge functions as an explanatory pressure point. Design is introduced here as a positive abductive explanation for functionally specified symbolic systems, not merely as a placeholder for missing chemistry. In observed experience, agency is causally adequate to produce codes, languages, software, formal mathematics, and functionally specified arrangements. The analogy remains limited because observed human agency is embodied, while the creator hypothesis proposes transcendent intelligence. That limitation does not erase the causal point. Agency remains the only directly observed class of cause known to produce functionally specified symbolic systems. The inference to a transcendent source remains philosophical and analogical, rather than laboratory demonstrated. Why evolution does not answer the first life question. A frequent confusion in origins debates is the blending of evolution after life with the origin of life. These are not the same question. A population of bacteria can undergo change over generations. A population of animals can adapt to environmental pressures. These are processes inside living systems. They do not answer how the first living system came into being. Darwinian evolution in the modern biological sense requires heritable variation. Selection can filter among replicators only after there are replicators. And variation can accumulate only after there is continuity from one generation to the next. Before heredity exists, there is no lineage. Without lineage, there is no ordinary population genetics. Without a memory mechanism, successful states are not preserved long enough to build on one another. Prebiotic systems may undergo chemical selection, autocatalytic amplification, compartment-level competition, or self-organization. Those concepts are important and should not be dismissed. Autocatalytic set theory and dynamic kinetic stability are serious naturalistic attempts to bridge chemistry and heredity. In autocatalytic set models, collections of molecules can mutually catalyze one another's formation from a basic food source. Dynamic kinetic stability approaches emphasize the persistence of self-reproducing entities far from equilibrium. These ideas weaken any simplistic chance or mind-only framing. The remaining pressure point is more specific. Can such chemistry plausibly cross the threshold into a durable, symbolically coded, self-sustaining hereditary system with open-ended evolvability? The core issue is not whether living things can change. The issue is whether unguided chemistry has been shown to generate the first system that can preserve and transmit functional information. The first self-maintaining, reproducing system would have needed to persist long enough to copy itself or transmit its structure. It would have needed some boundary separating internal chemistry from the external environment. It would have needed access to energy. It would have needed a way to preserve useful internal organization. If copying occurred with no fidelity, cumulative improvement would be lost. If copying was too fragile, the lineage would collapse. If internal chemistry did not persist through division, reproduction would not begin. A simple bubble splitting into two pieces is not automatically life. It becomes relevant only if the daughter compartments preserve internal chemistry capable of continuing the same process. The logical turning point is not mere division. The logical turning point is heritable continuity. Once that exists, selection can begin to preserve variations. Before that exists, the system repeatedly falls back into chemistry without lineage. This means that time alone is not enough. The phrase, "given enough time, anything can happen," is not a sound principle. Time does not automatically generate order. Time permits events, but events require lawful conditions, available materials, energy gradients, and mechanisms that preserve gains. Without preservation, a successful arrangement dissolves and the process restarts. Probability reasoning in origin questions is difficult because the exact probability space is not known. We do not know all possible prebiotic environments, all possible chemical pathways, or all possible early replicators. Assigning a precise percentage to the chance origin of life would be misleading. But the absence of a precise percentage does not mean all explanations are equal. We can still reason about causal adequacy. Chance can produce local arrangements. Law can produce regularities. Selection can preserve successful variants after replication begins. But the origin of a selectable system remains the difficult step. Evolution is powerful after there is a system that can reproduce with heritable variation. It cannot be invoked as the full explanation for the origin of the very mechanism that makes evolution possible: causality, energy, matter, and the beginning of the universe. The second major part of the inquiry concerns the origin of the physical universe. The Big Bang model describes the universe as expanding from an early hot dense state. It should not be oversimplified as a normal explosion from a point into empty space. The important point is that the observable universe is traced backward to a beginning-like boundary in known physics, while the earliest conditions remain model-dependent and disputed. If space, time, matter, and energy, as we know them, are part of the universe, then the cause or ground of the universe cannot simply be another ordinary event inside the universe. A cause of the physical order must be deeper than the physical order it explains. Naturalistic models may propose a prior physical state, quantum field, cyclic universe, multiverse, or deeper mathematical structure. Each proposal can be investigated, yet each still raises a further question. Why does that prior system exist, and why does it have law-like power to produce universes? A common naturalistic move is to say that energy or matter always existed in some form. But if matter and energy are treated as eternal brute facts, then the naturalistic view has not eliminated ultimate explanation. It has chosen an impersonal ultimate reality. The theistic view also reaches an ultimate reality, but that ultimate reality is intelligent rather than impersonal. This means the question is not whether every worldview reaches something ultimate. It does. The question is which ultimate reality better explains what exists, impersonal physical law or intelligent mind. A mind can explain information, purpose, rationality, mathematics, and law. Impersonal matter can be described by law, but it does not by itself explain why law exists or why law is intelligible. Inside the universe, events operate through lawful cause and effect relations. Gravity, chemistry, motion, energy transfer, and biological processes are not chaotic in the sense of being lawless. They are ordered. This observation does not prove a creator by itself. It does, however, raise the question of why reality is law-governed at all. A law-governed system is not explained by pointing only to the laws inside the system, unless the laws themselves are explained. If a proposed explanation says that one universe came from another universe, the question is pushed backward. If that prior universe came from another, the question is pushed backward again. If the explanation is an infinite chain of physical causes, then no ultimate explanation has been given for the chain itself. Infinite regress may postpone the question, but it does not answer why the whole chain exists. A multiverse proposal can be useful within cosmological theorizing. It can provide a framework for explaining why one universe among many has life-permitting parameters. But even if a multiverse exists, it is not nothing. It would require a generating mechanism, laws, parameters, or a deeper physical structure. That system would itself require explanation. The multiverse therefore does not remove metaphysics. It creates a larger metaphysical object. Instead of explaining one universe, it must explain a universe producing reality. If the multiverse is treated as self-existing, then naturalism has assigned ultimacy to an impersonal system. If the creator is treated as self-existing, theism assigns ultimacy to intelligence. The debate is not whether there is an ultimate stopping point. The debate is whether the ultimate is mindless or intelligent. The creator hypothesis has a different structure. It does not propose one more physical event before the Big Bang. It proposes a non-physical intelligent cause of physical reality. If time begins with the physical universe, the creator is not before the universe in a temporal sequence in the ordinary physical sense. The creator is ontologically prior, the ground of why the physical order exists at all. Because cause and effect language ordinarily describes temporal ordering inside the universe, this claim must be stated carefully. If time itself is part of the physical order being explained, then causal language at this boundary means ontological dependence, or metaphysical grounding, not one ordinary event occurring earlier on the same timeline. A fair analysis must also acknowledge serious naturalistic counterproposals. Quantum cosmology, no-boundary models, cyclic cosmologies, multiverse theories, and other speculative frameworks attempt to address the beginning question. These models are not casual speculations. They are serious attempts within theoretical cosmology to describe the earliest state or to avoid a simple temporal beginning. At the same time, their interpretation, empirical testability, and mathematical completeness remain disputed. They do not eliminate the deeper metaphysical question. They relocate it into a mathematical framework, quantum law, prior physical structure, or rule-governed explanatory system. Naturalism can answer ultimate questions by saying that the universe, laws, multiverse, or mathematical structure simply exists. Theism can answer by saying that the creator exists necessarily. Both views end in an ultimate. The question is not whether some stopping point exists, but which proposed ultimate better explains law, mathematical intelligibility, functional biological information, consciousness, rationality, and the existence of a contingent physical order. Occam's razor is also relevant. One may argue that an intelligent creator appears to be a more complex explanation than impersonal laws or a self-existing physical foundation. But simplicity is not the only criterion. Explanatory scope, explanatory power, coherence, and avoidance of ad hoc assumptions also matter. An impersonal brute physical foundation may appear simpler in one sense, but it may explain less. A creator hypothesis may appear metaphysically richer, but it may explain more. The issue is total explanatory adequacy, not a simple counting exercise. Intelligent design as a competing explanation. Intelligent design is not introduced here as a shortcut for ignorance. It is introduced as a philosophical inference to the best explanation for information-rich, law-governed, purposeful order. In ordinary reasoning, we infer intelligence when we find specified information arranged toward function. A written sentence, a computer program, a mathematical proof, and an engineered machine are not explained merely by listing their material components. They require an explanation of arrangement. The central design argument is not that complexity alone proves design. A random pile of debris can be complex. The relevant feature is functional, information-bearing organization. DNA is complex in a relevant sense because sequence matters. A living cell is complex in a relevant sense because parts cooperate toward survival, reproduction, regulation, and inheritance. Genesis 1:1 is relevant because its numerical structure appears coherent and connected to mathematical constants through values derived from the text itself. The argument must avoid the loose claim that all information requires intelligence. Some forms of order and statistical information occur without minds, as in crystals, snowflakes, and physical patterns. The question is narrower. How did functionally specified, sequence-dependent biological information and its translation machinery originate? Functional biological information is different from mere Shannon information. Shannon information measures uncertainty or statistical structure. A random sequence can contain high Shannon information. A crystal can contain orderly structure. Neither case by itself proves intelligence. The design argument concerns sequence-dependent arrangements that contribute to a specified biological function, such as binding, catalysis, regulation, replication, or protein coding. The inference to design remains analogical and contested. Human minds are embodied and operate within the physical world. The creator hypothesis proposes transcendent intelligence. That is a real disanalogy, but observed intelligence remains causally adequate for the type of effect under discussion. Codes, languages, symbolic systems, formal mathematics, and functional arrangements. Unguided chemistry must supply an alternative mechanism for the origin of the same class of effect. This inquiry does not claim that intelligent design explains every physical mechanism in detail. It claims that intelligent design may better explain the origin of the framework in which mechanisms operate. Laws, matter, energy, life-permitting conditions, biological information, rational consciousness, and the possible scriptural numerical structure examined here. The strength of this claim depends on cumulative comparison. Genesis 1:1, textual and numerical data. Genesis 1:1 in the Hebrew Masoretic form reads, Bereshit bara Elohim et ha-shamayim ve'et ha'aretz. The usual English rendering is, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Some modern translations construe the opening differently, but the numerical argument does not depend on one English translation. It depends on the Hebrew consonantal text. The verse contains 7 Hebrew words and 28 Hebrew letters when counted without vowel points. The standard Gematria values are as follows. The first word is Bereshit, meaning in beginning. Its standard value is 913, and its reduced value is 13. The Hebrew form is Bereshit. The second word is bara, meaning created. Its standard value is 203, and its reduced value is 5. The Hebrew form is bara. The third word is Elohim, meaning God. Its standard value is 86, and its reduced value is 14. The Hebrew form is Elohim. The fourth word is et. The direct object marker. Its standard value is 401, and its reduced value is 5. The Hebrew form is et. The fifth word is Hashemayim, meaning the heavens. Its standard value is 395, and its reduced value is 17. The Hebrew form is Hashemayim. The sixth word is ve'et, meaning and plus the direct object marker. Its standard value is 407, and its reduced value is 11. The Hebrew form is ve'et. The seventh word is haaretz, meaning the earth. Its standard value is 296, and its reduced value is 17. The Hebrew form is haaretz. The standard total is 913 plus 203 plus 86 plus 401 plus 395 plus 407 plus 296, which equals 2,701. The reduced total is 13 plus 5 plus 14 plus 5 plus 17 plus 11 plus 17, which equals 82. These are arithmetic claims that can be checked directly. The first level of the numerical structure is therefore simple. 7 words, 28 letters, standard total, 2,701, and reduced total, 82. The calculations use the ordinary standard Hebrew alphanumeric values, Aleph equals 1 through Tav equals 400. Final letter forms are counted by their ordinary letter values, not by the extended final letter values sometimes used in other systems. This matters because changing the Gematria system can change the totals. The claim here is precise. Under the received Hebrew consonantal text and ordinary standard Hebrew values, Genesis 1:1 totals 2,701. Under the stated letter level reduced method, it totals 82. The location of the pattern matters. A pattern in a random verse would be less significant than a pattern in the opening verse of Scripture. Genesis 1:1 functions as a threshold statement. It introduces God, creation, heaven, earth, and the beginning. If a creator intended to place a mathematical signature in Scripture, the first verse is a natural location for such a signature. This does not prove the signature claim by itself, but it increases the explanatory relevance of the pattern. A critic can argue that the first verse is examined more closely than other verses, which creates selection bias. That objection is serious, but the first verse is not arbitrary. It has theological primacy and textual prominence. The proper question is whether the observed pattern is coherent enough, internally constrained enough, and rare enough under fixed comparison testing to overcome the suspicion of chance. The 37 and 73 structure. The standard Gematria total of Genesis 1:1 is 2,701. This factors as 37 times 73. Both numbers are prime, and they are digit reversals of one another. The number 2,701 is also the 73rd triangular number. 1 plus 2 plus 3, and continuing through 73, equals 2701. The verse total is therefore not only divisible by 37 and 73, it is geometrically structured. The roles of 37 and 73 should be stated carefully. The number 37 is the dominant internal divisor in the subset structure. The number 73 governs the total triangular structure. The argument does not require 37 and 73 to behave identically in every test. Their roles are connected, but not identical. The letter count also has a triangular feature. Genesis 1:1 contains 7 words and 28 letters, and 28 is the 7th triangular number. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 7 equals 28. Thus the verse has a smaller word-letter triangular relationship, alongside the larger 2,701 and 73 triangular relationship. The first 5 words are also important as a major phrase. The first 5 Hebrew words, rendered in English as, "In the beginning God created the heavens," total 1,998, which equals 37 times 54. This means the first major phrase of the verse is already divisible by 37 before the final earth phrase is added. The final 2 words are especially important. The sixth word, viet, has value 407, which equals 11 times 37. The seventh word, haaretz, has value 296, which equals 8 times 37. Together they total 703, which equals 37 times 19. The final phrase, and the earth, is therefore itself structured around 37. This matters thematically. The verse speaks of God creating the heavens and the earth. The first 5 words identify the beginning, God, the act of creation, and the heavens. The final 2 words identify the earth, the created realm in which the reader stands. The number 1998, functioning as a 37 multiple, gives the first major phrase its own numerical identity. The number 703, functioning as a 37 multiple, gives the final phrase its own numerical identity. Together, both phrase units belong inside the larger 2701 structure. This does not prove design by itself, but it increases the coherence of the pattern. The structure is not merely that the whole verse total is divisible by 37. The first major phrase is divisible by 37. The final earth phrase is divisible by 37, and the whole verse is divisible by 37. The number 73 governs the completed triangular total, while 37 governs the internal divisibility of the verse. The 37 subset architecture. Among the 7 words of Genesis 1:1, there are 127 possible non-empty word position subsets. A subset can consist of 1 word, 2 words, 3 words, and so on, up to the full verse. 23 of those 127 subsets are divisible by 37. This should not be overstated. The 23 hits are not 23 independent miracles. Since the whole verse total is divisible by 37, any proper subset divisible by 37 has a complementary subset also divisible by 37. That explains why the hits form pairs. The careful statement is that Genesis 1:1 has 11 non-trivial complementary pairs, plus the full verse. Among the 37 divisible subset hits, the complement pair feature does not erase the pattern. It clarifies the pattern. The structure is a modular cascade. The word values considered modulo 37 create relationships that cause the 37 divisible subsets to appear in a balanced way. The residues modulo 37 are revealing. Word 1, Bereshit, has value 913 and residue 25. Word 2, Bara, has value 203 and residue 18. Word 3, Elohim, has value 86 and residue 12. Word 4, Et, has value 401 and residue 31. Word 5, Hashemayim, has value 395 and residue 25. Word 6, Ve'et, has value 407 and residue 0. Word 7, Haaretz, has value 296 and residue 0. A factor frequency review makes the same point from another angle. Smaller divisors naturally appear more often in subset sums. That is expected. But after the expected small factor region, factor 37 rises sharply above nearby values. In the computed factor frequency table, 37 divides 23 subset sums. Nearby factors are much lower. 35 divides 8. 36 divides 4. 38 divides 4. 39 divides 3. 40 divides 2. And 41 divides 5. Factor 73 divides only 3 subset sums, which is not a problem, because 73 is not proposed as the internal subset divisor. Its role is the total triangular structure. The right conclusion is balanced. The subset structure does not prove divine authorship by itself, but it is real structure, not an invented impression. It refines the statistical question: how common is this kind of configuration among comparable 7-word Hebrew verses, especially verses whose total is already divisible by 37? If comparable structures are common, the evidential weight decreases. If Genesis 1:1 remains exceptional under fixed rules, the evidential weight increases. Reduced Gematria and the Torah-Pi pattern. Standard Gematria assigns Hebrew letters their conventional values. Aleph equals 1, Bet equals 2, Yod equals 10, Kof equals 100, Resh equals 200, Shin equals 300, Tav equals 400, and so on. The reduced method used here is letter-level reduced Gematria, often called a Mispar Katan style reduction. Decimal zeros are removed from each letter value before summing. Thus Tav equals 400 becomes 4, Resh equals 200 becomes 2, Yod equals 10 becomes 1, and ordinary unit letters retain their unit values. This is not an iterative digital root reduction of the final word or verse total unless explicitly stated. Under this reduced method, Genesis 1:1 has reduced value 82. The Hebrew word Torah, has standard value 611 and reduced value 17. These four numbers form the numerical bridge to pi. Torah standard equals 611, Torah reduced equals 17, Genesis 1:1 standard equals 2701. Genesis 1:1 reduced equals 82. Torah is relevant because Genesis 1:1 is the opening verse of the Torah. It is not a random external term. The structure is compact. The word Torah provides two-digit counts, 611 and 17, while the first verse of the Torah provides two target sums, 2701 and 82. The pi digit sum relationships then pair the Torah counts with the Genesis sums. The claim examined here is not simply that a number appears somewhere inside pi. Pi is infinite, and any unrestricted search through its digits will eventually find many patterns. The stronger claim is that values derived from Torah and Genesis 1:1 define digit counts and digit sums in the early decimal expansion of pi. The first 17 decimal digits of pi sum to 82. The first 611 decimal digits of pi sum to 2701. Digits 612 through 628 also sum to 82. Digits 18 through 628 sum to 2701. But that last observation is a consequence of the same 628-digit partition and should not be counted as an independent confirmation. The number 628 is not introduced as an independent sacred number. It is generated by the two Torah values already used in the argument. Torah standard value 611 plus Torah reduced value 17 equals 628. The first 628 decimal digits of pi are examined because they contain the combined standard and reduced Torah count windows. This explanation reduces the charge that 628 is arbitrary within the stated framework. It does not eliminate the selection effect concern entirely. The 628-digit window has force only if the Torah and Genesis values are accepted as the predefined framework for testing. A complete statistical assessment would still need comparison terms, comparison constants, and discovery chronology under fixed rules. The strongest pi observation is the standard value pairing. Torah equals 611, and the first 611 decimal digits of pi sum to 2701, the standard value of Genesis 1:1. The reduced value pairing, 17 to 82, is also real, but it is not as discriminating because reduced values are smaller and more easily shared by other terms. The 612 through 628 interval summing to 82 is interesting, but it belongs to the same Torah and Genesis partition. The observations should not be inflated into more independent events than they are. A fair objection is that decimal digits from a random-looking sequence have average value approximately 4.5. Therefore, the expected sum of 611 decimal digits is near 2749.5. The observed sum, 2701, is not wildly far from expectation. The expected sum of 17 digits is near 76.5, and the observed sum, 82, is also not individually rare. This means the digit sums are not standalone statistical miracles. The evidential interest lies elsewhere. It lies in the text-derived pairing. Torah gives 611 and 17. Genesis 1:1 gives 2701 and 82. Pi supplies early digit windows whose sums return the Genesis values. The question is whether this pairing was fixed before testing, whether other meaningful Hebrew terms do the same, whether other constants do the same, and whether the discovery history shows disciplined rules or broad search selection. Pi also matters because it is not a local cultural invention. It is a universal mathematical constant tied to geometry, circles, cycles, measurement, and physical law. If the opening verse of the Torah contains values that map onto pi in a structured way, the connection is mathematically relevant. But the claim must be kept disciplined. The pi structure is arithmetically verified and internally coherent. Its final statistical force depends on formal comparison testing. There is also a historical access issue if the pattern is treated as intentional human engineering. Ancient and medieval authors could know approximations to pi, but the primary 611 to 2701 relationship would require access to at least 611 correct decimal digits if it were deliberately engineered as a decimal pi correspondence. That makes ordinary ancient human engineering harder to sustain as a complete explanation. But this point is conditional. If the pattern was found by modern searching, then historical inaccessibility does not matter. The proper test is fixed rule discovery chronology and comparison analysis. The dispute is therefore not over arithmetic. The arithmetic can be checked. The dispute is over interpretation, chance, post hoc selection, human numerical shaping, or intentional signature. Why this is not merely numerology. Numerology becomes weak when the analyst is free to change the text, change the counting system, change the mathematical constant, change the digit window, change the grouping method, and then report only successful results. This inquiry does not treat unrestricted pattern hunting as strong evidence. The argument is strongest only where the rules are constrained. The core rules are straightforward. The Hebrew text is the received consonantal form of Genesis 1:1. The standard Gematria values are the ordinary Hebrew alphanumeric values. Final Hebrew letter forms are counted by their ordinary standard values unless another system is explicitly named. The reduced method is letter-level reduction. Decimal digits of pi are counted after the decimal point. The principal text-derived values are Genesis 1:1, standard value 2701, Genesis 1:1 reduced value 82, Torah standard value 611, and Torah reduced value 17. The strongest evidence is the main mathematical spine. Genesis 1:1 has 7 words and 28 letters. Its standard value is 2701. 2701 equals 37 times 73. 2701 is the 73rd triangular number. The first 5 words equal 1998, which is 37 times 54. The final 2 words equal 703, which is 37 times 19. Together, 1998 plus 703 equals 2701. 23 word position subsets are divisible by 37, structured as 1 full verse hit plus 11 complementary pairs. 2 individual words are divisible by 37. Reduced Genesis 1:1 equals 82, Torah equals 611, and reduced Torah equals 17. And the pi digit sum structure returns 2701 and 82. These claims are directly checkable under stated rules. They may support a serious design inference, while formal uniqueness and exact rarity remain pending comparison testing. Some additional observations may be striking but should be treated as secondary. Product of words relationships, center prime symmetry, first letter ratios, square root relationships, Fibonacci or phi observations, and source-reported broader scans may enrich the pattern, but they depend more heavily on grouping conventions or operation choices. They should support, not replace, the core evidence. If a secondary observation is weakened, the main Genesis 1:1, 2701, 37, 73, 703, Torah, and pi case still stands independently. This discipline matters because it prevents the argument from inflating itself. Dependent relationships should not be counted as independent miracles. Supporting observations should not carry the same weight as the core arithmetic. A responsible numerical argument must be willing to say what would weaken it. The signature claim would be weakened if similar or stronger clusters appeared frequently across ordinary Hebrew texts under the same rules. If comparable patterns appeared only after changing rules from case to case. If many alternative textually relevant terms produce similar or better pi relationships. If other constants produced equally strong correspondences under the same methods. Or if manuscript history showed that the received wording was optimized by human scribes to create the numerical structure. Conversely, the interpretation would be strengthened if fixed rule corpus testing showed Genesis 1:1 to be exceptional in textual position, internal structure, triangular geometry, Torah values, and pi relationships. The responsible conclusion is therefore neither dismissal nor exaggeration. The numerical structure is real under stated rules. It is textually central. It is semantically relevant. It is multi-layered, It is dependency-aware. It is open to testing. That makes it serious candidate evidence. It does not make it an automatic proof. Human design, Scribal optimization, and the signature question. One possible alternative is human literary design. Human authors and scribes can produce numerical artistry. Biblical texts do contain patterns, parallelisms, structures, word counts, and literary designs. Therefore, the possibility of human numerical arrangement should not be dismissed. But a human design explanation must explain the whole cluster, not merely one feature. It must account for a grammatically coherent and theologically foundational opening verse. The total 2,701. The factorization 37 times 73, the 73rd triangular identity, the 7-word and 28-letter arrangement, the first 5-word 1,998 structure, the final 2-word 703 structure, the combined phrase division of 1,998 plus 703 equaling 2,701, the 37 divisible subset architecture, the reduced total 82, the Torah values 611 and 17, and the pi relationships requiring hundreds of correct decimal digits if the pi layer was intentionally engineered before modern computation. Explaining one layer is not enough. A human engineering hypothesis must also provide a plausible mechanism. It must identify a historical agent or scribal tradition, show that the agent knew or could compute the relevant targets, explain how the wording was optimized without damaging Hebrew grammar or theological meaning, and provide textual or historical evidence that such optimization occurred. Without those elements, human numerical design remains an abstract possibility rather than a superior explanation. It may explain some kinds of literary structure. It does not easily explain a cross-domain pattern involving Hebrew text, theological placement, prime factorization, triangular geometry, subset residues, reduced gematria, and pi. The divine signature interpretation becomes stronger as the layers cross domains. The argument is not merely that the verse has arithmetic features. The argument is that those features form a coordinated architecture at the threshold statement of Scripture. Formal rarity still requires testing, but the human design alternative carries its own evidential burden and cannot be assumed merely because human beings are capable of numerical artistry. Objections and responses. Objection: the origin of life is an open scientific problem, not evidence for God. Response: correct in part. An incomplete scientific explanation is not automatic proof of design. The argument here is not that a gap proves God. The argument is that the origin of a self-sustaining hereditary information system remains an unresolved explanatory pressure point. When that pressure point is combined with cosmological causation, mathematical intelligibility, and the Genesis 1:1 structure, it contributes to a cumulative comparison. Objection: RNA world research solves the DNA problem. Response: RNA world research is serious and has made meaningful progress. It shows that RNA can store information and catalyze reactions, and that aspects of RNA chemistry can be studied under controlled conditions. But it has not yet demonstrated a complete pathway from non-living chemistry to a self-sustaining information-bearing evolving cell. It is an attempted solution, not a completed solution. Objection: natural selection explains complexity. Response: natural selection explains many changes after reproduction, with heritable variation exists. It does not fully explain the origin of the first hereditary system. Selection can preserve successful variants only after there is a reproducing lineage. The origin of that lineage remains logically prior to ordinary biological evolution. Objection: a creator also requires an explanation. Response: the creator hypothesis does not propose one more physical object inside the universe. It proposes a necessary intelligent source outside the physical order. Naturalism also reaches an ultimate stopping point, such as brute laws, eternal physical reality, a multiverse, or unexplained quantum fields. The issue is not whether explanation stops somewhere. The issue is which stopping point better explains law, information, rationality, consciousness, and the Genesis 1:1 structure. Objection: the multiverse explains fine-tuning. Response: a multiverse could explain why one universe among many has life-permitting conditions, But a multiverse is not nothing. It would still require a generating mechanism, laws, parameters, or deeper structure. It relocates the question of ultimate explanation rather than eliminating it. Objection: Pi contains every pattern. Response: Pi is infinite, and unrestricted searches through its digits can produce many apparent patterns. That is why the argument does not rest on finding a random number somewhere inside Pi. The claim is more specific. Text-derived Torah values define digit counts, and text-derived Genesis values appear as digit sums. This is arithmetically real and internally coherent, but its final statistical force depends on fixed-rule comparison testing. Objection: Gematria is flexible. Response: Gematria can be abused if rules are changed freely. The core claim here uses fixed rules: the received Hebrew consonantal text, ordinary standard Hebrew values, ordinary final letter values, and a stated letter-level reduced method. The standard value 2701, the 37 times 73 factorization, and the 73rd triangular identity do not depend on flexible operation hunting. Objection: The conclusion is religious preference. Response: The inquiry is framed as a comparative explanation, not as an assertion of preference. The question is whether unguided naturalism or intelligent design better accounts for biological information, causality, law, mathematical intelligibility, and the Genesis 1:1 structure. The conclusion may have theological implications, but the argument is presented as cumulative reasoning from evidence. Objection: The signature claim is unfalsifiable. Response: The signature claim is testable in several ways. It would be weakened if similar clusters appeared frequently in comparable Hebrew texts under the same rules, if other textually meaningful terms produced equal or stronger pi relationships, if other constants produced the same pattern under the same methods, or if textual history showed human numerical optimization. It would be strengthened if fixed-rule corpus testing showed Genesis 1:1 to be exceptional. Objection: The pattern could reflect human literary design or scribal optimization. Response: That is possible in abstract, but it must explain the entire cluster. Grammar, meaning, placement, 2701, 37, 73, triangular geometry, 703, subset architecture, 82, Torah 611 and 17, and pi. It must also explain how the relevant decimal pi relationship could have been intentionally engineered if it predates access to hundreds of correct decimal digits. Human design is a live alternative, but it needs evidence and mechanism. Objection: Occam's razor favors impersonal laws over a creator. Response: Simplicity matters, but it is not the only criterion. A simpler theory that explains less may be inferior to a richer theory that explains more. If the data include law, mathematical intelligibility, biological information, consciousness, rationality, and a layered Genesis 1:1 structure, an intelligent ultimate may have greater explanatory scope than impersonal brute fact. Objection: The thesis forces a false dichotomy. Response: The comparison here is limited. It primarily compares unguided naturalism with a transcendent intelligent cause hypothesis. It does not claim to exhaust every possible worldview, such as deism, theistic evolution, panpsychism, mathematical Platonism, or other hybrid views. The conclusion is narrower. Within this comparison, intelligent design appears to have greater explanatory force. Objection: Observed intelligence is embodied, not transcendent. Response: This is a serious limitation. All directly observed information-producing minds are embodied agents within physical law. The creator hypothesis proposes transcendent intelligence. The design inference is therefore analogical, not a direct laboratory demonstration. But the analogy is still relevant, because intelligence remains the only directly observed cause known to produce symbolic codes, language, formal mathematics, and functionally specified information. Comparative explanatory assessment. The cumulative comparison can be stated plainly. Origin of life evidence does not prove design by itself. But naturalistic research has not yet demonstrated a complete pathway from non-living chemistry to a self-sustaining hereditary system with information storage, replication, energy use, compartmental continuity, and open-ended evolvability. Intelligent agency is known to produce functionally specified symbolic systems. That gives design explanatory relevance. Cosmology does not prove a creator by physics alone. But the existence of a law-governed, mathematically intelligible universe raises the question of ultimate explanation. Naturalism may stop with brute laws, quantum fields, a multiverse, or deeper physical reality. Theism stops with a necessary intelligent source. Both views reach an ultimate. The question is which ultimate better explains law, order, intelligibility, information, consciousness, and rationality. Genesis 1:1 does not prove divine authorship by a single calculation. But the opening verse of the Torah and Bible contains a coherent numerical structure under stated rules: 7 words, 28 letters, standard value 2701, reduced value 82, factorization 37 times 73, 73rd triangular identity, final 2-word value 703, and a 37 divisible subset architecture. Torah contributes standard value 611 and reduced value 17, which connect to digit sum relationships in pi. The numerical case is strongest when it is treated in layers. The arithmetic is directly checkable. The statistical significance requires comparison testing. The theological interpretation belongs to the cumulative argument rather than to any single calculation. The claim is not that every observation is independent, nor that every pattern is equally strong. The claim is that the core structure is real, textually central, internally coherent, and difficult to dismiss responsibly without testing. Unguided naturalism can describe many operations inside the universe. It can describe chemical reactions, biological change after life exists, physical law, and cosmological models. But it struggles to ground why there is a law-governed order at all, why that order is mathematically intelligible, how functional biological information first arose, and why the opening verse of Scripture contains the observed numerical architecture. A transcendent intelligent source has broader explanatory resources for these features. Mind is causally adequate for information, symbolic systems, language, mathematics, and purposeful order. A creator also offers a coherent ultimate explanation for law, rationality, and intelligibility. The creator hypothesis does not remove all mystery, but it provides a kind of explanation that matches the class of effects under consideration. This does not mean the case is beyond challenge. Origin of life research may advance, corpus testing may reduce the numerical rarity, discovery chronology may weaken the pi layer. Other metaphysical alternatives may explain part of the evidence differently. But the current cumulative comparison favors intelligent design over unguided naturalism. Final evidence-weighted conclusion. The strongest conclusion is not that any single fact proves divine authorship. The strongest conclusion is that multiple independent domains point in the same direction. From biology, the central issue is not whether organisms change over time. The issue is how the first self-sustaining hereditary system arose before ordinary biological evolution could operate. Current origin of life research is serious and has made progress, but it has not yet demonstrated a complete pathway from non-living chemistry to an integrated information-bearing, self-reproducing system with open-ended evolvability. From cosmology, the central issue is not whether physics can describe early universe models. The issue is why there is a law-governed, mathematically intelligible physical order at all. Naturalism may stop with brute laws, quantum fields, a multiverse, or a deeper physical reality. Theism stops with a necessary intelligent source. Both views reach an ultimate. The question is which ultimate better explains law, order, intelligibility, information, consciousness, and the existence of a contingent physical order. From Genesis 1:1, the central issue is not whether arithmetic alone proves divine authorship. It does not. The issue is whether the opening verse of the Torah and Bible contains a coherent, textually central, multi-layered numerical structure that qualifies for serious design consideration. Under the stated rules, Genesis 1:1 has 7 words, 28 letters, standard value 2701, reduced value 82, a 37 times 73 factorization, a 73rd triangular identity, a final 2-word value of 703, and a 37 divisible subset architecture. Torah adds standard value 611 and reduced value 17, which connect to digit sum relationships in pi. The argument is therefore not that any single feature forces the conclusion. The argument is that the combined pattern is better explained by intelligence than by unguided naturalism. Naturalism can describe operations inside the universe, but it struggles to ground the ultimate origin of law, information, rationality, and the specific numerical architecture observed in Genesis 1:1. A transcendent intelligent source has broader explanatory resources for those features. The conclusion is evidence-weighted rather than deductive. The Genesis 1:1 structure meets the necessary conditions for serious design candidate evaluation, but its final statistical force depends on formal testing. Origin of life research remains active, and cosmology contains serious naturalistic counterproposals. Those facts should be acknowledged, but acknowledging them does not erase the cumulative pressure of the evidence. Within the limited comparison between unguided naturalism and a transcendent intelligent cause hypothesis, the evidence considered here more strongly supports intelligent design. The case is not final because every possible objection has been eliminated. It is strong because the same direction of inference appears across multiple domains: information, causality, law, mathematical intelligibility, and the structure of the first verse of Scripture.